To date, we have had a couple of different ways of how to deliver a speech. You've had an opportunity to give your speech up here with a partner standing next to you with your interviews. You've had your collage speech where you got to stand in front of an audience. You didn't get to use a podium. And then you got to give a speech where you got to use a podium. So today, what I'm going to talk about is what happens if you have to give a speech and you don't have a podium in front of you. So let's talk a little bit about delivery. And this is going to be fundamental because with your academic speeches, it's a little bit longer, and here's where it's really important that you guide the audience along with your speech. So we've learned how to use a podium. What do we do with the space in front of us? You'll notice that comedians and motivational speakers don't use a podium, and the reason why that is because they want to engage better with their audience. So what do you do with the space in front of you? As a speaker, it is incumbent upon you to guide the audience along with your speech, because this is the first and the last time the audience hears your speech. So what do you do when you get up in front of an audience? The first thing you want to do is establish your presence. Make sure the audience is paying attention to you before you start your speech. I'm going to move off camera for just a second to show you what it looks like. So when you come up to get your call to come up to give your speech, position yourself solidly on the ground, plant your feet solidly on the ground. Make sure that your feet aren't too far apart, because that way you'll lose balance, or you don't make sure that your feet aren't too close together, because if you lock your knees, you'll probably pass out. So what do you do with your legs? Put your legs far enough apart, about the width of your shoulders. Okay? And so while they're there planted solidly on the ground, that way you don't sway. Because sometimes you're giving a speech, some people like to sway, or they shuffle their feet back and forth, or they lean back and forth, or they lean on one side and lean on the other. If you plant your feet solidly on the ground, you won't have a tendency to sway. Right? So now that's what we do with our feet. Next, we're going to talk about what to do with our hands and then what to do with our eyes. What do we do with our hands? Well, you won't have any notes in front of you, so you can't hold notes. So what do we typically do? Sometimes we put our hands in front of us, sometimes we put our hands behind us. You don't want to do that, because if you put your hands behind us, your shoulders start to gesture. You put your hand in front of us, people start wondering what's behind your hands. And so if your hands want to gesture, just let them go. Let them gesture, because when you gesture, words come out a little bit more easily. So where do you gesture? You don't want to gesture here, you don't want to gesture here. You want to gesture just enough for your audience. So right above your hip bone, right below your rib cage. And that's how you want to gesture. Invite the audience. Bring them into your speech. Now when you're gesturing, you're not begging an audience. You're not grabbing an audience. It's ever so subtle here to invite the audience. What Bill Clinton started was he started doing the thumb thing, because we were told by our parents it's rude to point, right? Because if you're pointing, you're accusing people of something. But what he did was he started using his thumb. But you use your thumb, you're still pointing, and it still closes your hand. It's like a fist. But if you open your hand, that's an invitation. You're encouraging the audience you're inviting the audience to your speech. So now you know what to do with your feet. You know what to do with your hands. What then do you do with your eyes? With your eyes, you want to make eye contact with your audience. Walt Whitman once said that the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? You invite the audience to your speech, because if you don't make eye contact with them, they're like, she doesn't care. If they don't care, why should I care? That's why you want to invite them. You don't want to stalk them either and then make eye contact with this one person. Oh my gosh, this feels uncomfortable. She's still looking at me. Oh God, move on, right? So make eye contact with a person for about a second or two and move on. Move up and down the aisles. Make sure you're paying attention to each of them. Now, when you get to the end, move back the same way as you came up through the aisles. What you don't want to do is make eye contact through the audience, come back, and then make eye contact through the audience. You're not a sprinkler, you're a human being. So make eye contact, engage them. If you come up with somebody and they have their head down, maybe they're not paying attention, linger there just for a second, right? Because when we hear sound coming at us, we tend to look up, I got you, and keep on moving. You're inviting the audience to your speech. So we know what to do with our feet. We know what to do with our hands. We know what to do with our eyes. Now what do we do with all of the space? As I said before, it is incumbent upon the speaker to guide the audience along with their speech, because it's the first and the last time you're giving the speech. It's not a question and answer period. It's not a conversation. It's a speech. Start your speech in the middle of the audience. In the middle of the audience, so in that bit of your speech, when you're in the middle of the audience, you want to do your entire introduction, your attention getter, the topic of your speech, the significance, your thesis statement, and your preview. Your preview is effectively the transition from the introduction to the body, but that is the only preview in which you do not move. So you're going to tell us what to expect when you get to the body of your speech. So after you've told us these are the three things we're going to talk about in your speech, you're going to saunter on to one side of the room, physically telling the audience that I'm done with my introduction, I'm moving into my first main point. So your entire first main point will be here. That way you bring the audience from each side of the room to you and engaging them that way. How do we get to the second main point? To get to the second main point, we have to build a bridge. But then again, you have to remind the audience what they just heard in their first main point to bring them to the second main point. With a better understanding of what my first main point is, I'm going to move into my second main point. So you're physically and verbally told the audience that you're done with one point, moving on to the second. Now that you're in your second main point, you're going to stay here. The second main point will be done here, engaging the audience from either side of the room. You're done with the second main point, transition into your third main point. This also will help you to remind you, if you forget where you are, wherever you are in your speech. So if I'm here, I should be in my third main point. You know that you're 3/4 of the way through the speech. The audience knows that you're 3/4 of the way through your speech. Your entire third main point will be here. Now to summarize and conclude, just take a step forward. Remind the audience of the three main points. Restate your thesis if it's a visualization step, if it's your persuasive speech. Remind us of your significance, or your action step if it's a persuasive speech, and your concluding statement. That way the audience knows that you're done with your speech. So that's how you would deliver a speech. Start in the middle, your introduction, the body, build bridges from one point to the next, summarize and conclude. And most important, it's the way you stand. Look confident, right? You know what to do with your feet, you know what to do with your hands, you know what to do with your eyes, you know what to do with your space. You're going to give a great speech. See you later when we get to talking about the podcasts.